Hi, I'm Tom Bailey, and in today's Speaker Stories episode, I'll be getting to know Adam Markel, who's a best-selling author, keynote speaker, workplace expert, and resilience researcher who inspires leaders to master the challenges of massive disruption. So, Adam, hello, and a very warm welcome to today's episode.
Hey, Tom, it's good to be here. Very good to be here with you.
Thank you so much for joining. And just out of interest for all of our listeners, whereabouts in the world are you right now?
I sort of trade time between Martha's Vineyard, this little
Mhm.
island off of Cape Cod, and
Amazing.
San Diego, California.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I just want to just share a little bit more about you before we do get started. So, Adam is author of the #1 Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Los Angeles Times, and publishes weekly bestseller Pivot: The Art and Science of Reinventing Your Career and Life. And his most recent book is called Change Proof: Leveraging the Power of Uncertainty to Build Long-Term Resilience. So, Adam, as well as being a best-selling author, I know you're also an incredible keynote speaker, and that's really where I want to play today around that topic of speaking.
Sure.
So, my first question for you today is, how important do you think public speaking has been for you in your career to date?
Um, I mean, in my current career, it's been the most important
Hmm.
thing. So I'll say for the last 15 years or so, it
Yeah.
has been the most important thing in my career. I love what Warren Buffett says about
Hmm.
public speaking or about speaking as in its entirety. He says the most important skill you can have in business. That's Warren Buffett. So he's
Love it.
arguably the most successful investor of our day, and is a widely listened to, watched public communicator himself.
Hmm.
So I think when somebody like that says that, it's worth
Uh,
it's worth paying attention.
Absolutely. And I guess just prior to those 15 years of I guess, being a keynote speaker, how important was speaking for you in your earlier career as well?
I was sort of terrified of
Yeah.
speaking publicly. I was
Yeah.
a lawyer, so part of
Okay.
my career journey has been that I spent 18 years in the practice of law in New York and
Yeah.
in New Jersey. And for the most part, when I would get up in court, I would have butterflies. I think people often do that,
Hmm.
have those butterflies. And as soon as I would get going, get started, sort of the butterflies would disappear a bit, but it was agony,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. And is there a particular memory right back to the beginning? It might have been at university or college, or that first time you had to stand up and speak in front of a live audience. Can you remember what that was and what it felt like at the time?
I do. I remember what it was like, and it wasn't back that far, but I just remember being in an audience. Again, it was a courtroom
Hmm.
audience, and it was a gallery filled with very, very experienced attorneys, and I had a very seasoned adversary and a judge who'd been on the bench for a number of years. And when I got up, I could barely put words together.
Yeah.
It was pretty embarrassing, and I
Hmm.
got pretty well shellacked that
Yeah.
day.
I bet.
Sliced to ribbons.
Hmm.
The good news is that after that did happen, it was several weeks later that I had to be back in court. I was a bit more ready,
Hmm.
prepared myself for it, and came out quite a bit better than the
Right.
first, which wasn't saying much, but it was definitely an improvement.
Yeah. So I guess what you know now, after having been a keynote speaker for so long, what's that one piece of advice you'd have given to a young Adam back in that courtroom? What do you think that advice might have been for him?
Well, I mean, because our company, I do a lot of keynote speaking
Hmm.
all around the world, and that's both in person and virtual. And our
Yeah.
company literally trains other people to be keynote speakers or to
Hmm.
get on a TED stage or things like that. And often it's founders of startup companies that are looking to communicate more effectively, a la what Warren Buffett said. If you want to raise capital, if you want to onboard new talent or attract new talent, if you want to sell, there's
Yeah.
almost nothing
Yeah.
more important than the enrollment conversation. Then you really have to master this kind of thing. And the advice that I give everybody that we train is simply this: it can't be about you. And it's subtle and may seem like, oh, I've some maybe heard that before or something, but we drill it to a pretty decent depth, I think, that before you're about to speak, whether it's in a virtual setting like the one we're in right now, or you're going to be on stage live in front of people, you really have to go inside, even if it's for just 10 seconds,
Yeah.
to remember that it's not about me, it's about them.
Love that.
It's about your
Mhm.
audience. And there's a phrase that we borrow that we learned some years ago called Om Namaha is the expression, and it loosely translates to "It's not about me." And I think it permeates everything you do on stage when you think that you have to perform, or you must people must like you or approve you, or uh, the feeling that you'll be humiliated or that you'll be
Hmm.
judged. All that stuff is of the ego.
Yeah.
And to be a very effective communicator and impactful speaker, someone that can really move audiences, whether they're small or very, very large audiences. I've spoken, I think the largest audience was probably 14,000 people
Mm.
when we were in China, and we were
Hmm.
doing some shows with Tony Robbins at the time. And it has to be that I'm there in service. And
Yeah.
if I'm willing to open myself up in that way, whether it's to open my heart, to be
Hmm.
more of a presence on stage than a pretense, things will go right
Yeah.
all the time. I mean, they will literally go right no matter what. I've fallen getting on stage. I mean, literally walked upstairs to trip as I'm being introduced and the music is playing and there's a huge, massive audience, and I've literally gotten on stage falling.
Hmm. Yeah.
And all of that has worked out fabulously well. And I mean, made tons of mistakes other than that. But when you're coming from the right place,
Hmm.
truly, you can correct your course without even trying. In fact, the
Yeah.
course gets corrected by the way that you are managing the energy in that room, and
Love
that's
that.
from a place of service as opposed
Yeah.
to a place of ego.
Great. And I guess my backstory and a lot of people we speak to is they have this fear of public speaking. And it really comes down to that same point of it's what am I going to look like? What will I sound like? What will the audience think of me? And what am I doing with my hands? How am I standing? And we're putting the spotlight on ourselves, but we should absolutely turn the spotlight into the audience and just think, how much value can I add to this audience? And it doesn't really matter what I look like or sound like, or or
And
how I'm
sometimes
being
it's
judged.
actually just asking them. I mean,
Yes.
it sounds funny, but
Mm.
the question is, there if there's a conversation, if there's a relationship that you've established,
Mm.
then people want to help you.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
I love
they
that.
really they want to see you succeed, believe it or not.
So you've mentioned literally tripping up on stage. And have there been any other big speaking disasters or failures or lessons learned that you've had along the way that you'd like to share with the audience?
I mean, there's been too many to count,
Yeah.
and I don't know that I would call any of them
No.
disasters, just mistakes.
Hmm.
And I feel like you to be successful in any industry, but I'll just because this isn't
Yeah.
one that I know quite well. You have to be willing to practice and practice and practice and get feedback, and hopefully you have a process for getting feedback from people that are also bought into that
Yeah.
process for feedback. And when you do that, there's almost no cap on the improvement that you could see in your capacity to do these things. We have a very simple, again, when we train someone, especially to be a TEDx speaker, because that is a very difficult task
Mm.
to get an idea that that you can chunk down, that you can create a through line of one single idea that is developed to a great depth in 18 minutes or less. And sometimes
Hmm.
TED Talks these days are 12 minutes, or they're
Yeah.
8 or 9 minutes. So they can be even shorter form than a traditional TED Talk. But when we're working on those things, we teach people a feedback system, which I don't mind sharing with your folks right now, which is what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what could be done differently. And
Mm.
often what we'll do is we curate a group of sort of 10 to 12 people who are all going to work on their very, very different TED Talks, but they're going
Hmm.
to work on them together over
Yeah.
about a 3 month period virtually. And they're constantly being drilled with this particular feedback loop that we use, so that once you've gotten sort of 50 different pieces of in the words that often people will say, a critique, when they've
Hmm.
gotten 50 critiques of their script and of their talk and of their delivery mechanics for that talk, but it's in the format of what worked for me, what didn't work for me, what could be done differently. They've gotten so used to getting this feedback in a way that doesn't threaten them. Feedback, and I think this is an important distinction, and I learned this from an old mentor of mine. It's supposed to be something that gives to you. It's a
Yes.
gift to you.
Yeah.
Whereas the way many people deliver, quote, feedback, it's like you're stealing something from someone. You're taking something away, like their self-esteem, for example. And
Yeah.
that's why people, when you say, hey, can I give you some feedback? Somebody's like, yeah, I'd rather
Yeah.
like have needles in my,
Yeah.
eyes than to get your feedback. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Because they've learned that to get a critique from probably school days, early school days, isn't very pleasant.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to shift it, because if you're somehow opposed to feedback, you resist it in any way, shape, or form, then there is a ceiling on just how much growth you can attain.
Yeah. Perfect. Love
And
that. And I think,
that's in any area,
yeah, of course. And I guess back to those people that are just starting out, they're maybe a little bit scared. We almost wait until we're perfect before we get started, but that's never going to work in that way. So you have to have that amateur phase when you're going out there practicing, delivering small presentations in front of small audiences, make mistakes, and know that's okay, because you're going to learn, aren't you, from every time you make a big mistake like that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a 1-year-old grandson. It
Hmm.
literally just turned one a couple of days ago, and he's fallen all over the place.
Yeah.
If he was concerned about how perfectly he was starting to walk, he probably would never even
No,
try. He
exactly.
wouldn't
Yeah.
walk. So I think it's a good example, just as you put it. You have to have those. Give yourself a break,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little kinder, a little gentler with yourself. That you're going to suck at something at the beginning.
Yeah.
Are you courageous enough? And there is courage
Mm.
involved in this. You're courageous enough to suck at it for a little while,
Yeah.
long enough to be able to learn some things, so that you can get better and better and better. And you will see over time this sort of exponential curve, the
Mm.
compounding effect
Yeah.
on your willingness to just be humble
Yeah.
and humility and all
And
this.
you can have some fun in the process as well.
Oh, you're gonna have a ton of fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So taking it, I guess, a step forward. So these people that's just starting out, and what about those people that want to break through from, I've been doing a bit of speaking, I've been getting some gigs, but I'm not yet making any money from it. I'm not yet getting paid to speak.
Yeah.
What's the advice to transition from a speaker to a paid keynote speaker?
Reach out to me.
Yeah, okay, of course.
Make an appointment to talk.
Yeah.
No, I'll say this: the biggest transition, honestly, there's a transition of mindset, and
Hmm.
then there's a transition of skill set
Yeah.
and tools,
Yeah.
resources. So on the mindset side, a lot of people just do not actually think they're worthy, and we could dive into that for hours, and we won't
Mhm.
do that now. But a lot of people don't really, at their core, believe that they're worth more than $1,000 or $1,500 for one of their
Yeah.
for an hour of their talk time,
Yeah.
and that's nonsense. And I mean, I'm not going to play the game of 10xing, like the
Hmm.
way things sometimes make it that simple. But
Yeah.
the truth is that most people could get paid anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 for a good talk.
Yeah.
Now, not at the very start. I get that.
Hmm.
And no one wants to be a fraud. Nobody wants to feel like they're selling something that's not worth what they're charging or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But in part, what keeps people stuck in a lower range to begin with is their mindset.
Yeah.
The second thing is skill set, and that is really developing a very, very good talk. And
Hmm.
I mean everything from a killer slide deck that
Hmm.
goes along with it, a very tight group of ideas, and the way that you structure those ideas and deliver those ideas, so that they're not just. And I don't, again, not to sort of poke fun at
Hmm.
past uh, things that were considered conventional wisdom, but that old adage about something like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
That people see that coming,
Hmm.
and nobody wants to feel like they're back behind a desk in school,
No.
because for most people, their early school experiences were not excellent teaching
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah,
I've
of course.
spoken to enough people to be able to make that generalization. I know
Hmm.
it wasn't the case for me.
Yeah.
So you just don't want to model those bad habits. So skill set is vitally important. And then there's resources. And that means, how do you build a speaking business? Well, it's like any other business that involves marketing, that involves a tremendous amount of astute work on online,
Hmm.
with
Yeah.
respect to your website, with respect
Hmm.
to SEO and SEM and things like that. And like I said, if people are interested in finding out more about those three buckets, they could certainly reach out to me, and
Amazing.
we're always happy to chat with people, even without charge, just to
Awesome.
give them our thoughts.
Thank you so much. And I've got a quite recently topical question. We obviously went into a global pandemic not that long ago. And the speaking world, I guess, stopped, or some people thought it had stopped. So how did you personally transition during this period? And I guess what learnings have we taken from the pandemic in the world of public speaking?
That is literally a brilliant question to be asking, because we're not out of a pandemic, and the changes that started at the start, maybe March of 2020,
Yeah.
are still permeating
Mm,
right now. They're still percolating, and things are still changing. So the business did stop. I would say it stopped on a dime
yeah.
in that month of March, and in that month of April, and even a little bit of May, when it came to sort of just the gigs that people had booked were all canceled,
Yeah.
or were suspended, or were postponed. That happened across the board. Travel was shut down, and that's how people were speaking back then.
Yeah.
We were using Zoom. Our company was kind of early adoption on Zoom back in 2016.
Nice.
So we were familiar with that platform, and we immediately just started to put content out without charging for it. And I was making videos and sending them out, putting them on YouTube, publishing them, doing summits. We did a few virtual summits at the time,
Yeah.
invited some other people to come and join us. We did like a 9-hour long
Mm,
live summit
nice.
early in April. Yeah, to help people to see that there were going to be opportunities that were going to come out of the disruption. I think we hadn't booked a gig, a paid virtual gig, until June. So literally
Yeah.
between sort of March and, I don't know when we booked that gig, maybe we booked it in May or something, when organizations had finally come to the conclusion, oh, we're not just going to come right out of this. Like, even though we were hearing, oh, it'll all be good by May,
Yeah.
we'll just wait until then and wait and see. And when we got to May and everything was closed down and still looked like months and months more, there were organizations that said, yeah, we've got to get together with our people. I love corporate gigs. The brand is very much around resilience and resilience training, et cetera. I've
Yeah.
written this recent book, Change Proof, came out in February. This past year, 2022, very big bestseller, and all about how we leverage uncertainty and all of the unknowns to become change proof. And secret ingredient there is no surprise here, is resilience, right? I'm wearing an I Am Resilient t-shirt today.
I love it.
For us, it was, we booked that first gig. We realized, from our standpoint, we were going to be doing virtual work for the near future, for the indefinite future, in fact. And we booked a lot of virtual gigs toward the end of that first year of COVID. And then we booked more gigs in the second year of COVID than we had booked in the year before COVID.
Great.
I'll say that again.
Love it.
We booked more gigs in the second year of COVID than in the year prior to COVID.
Yeah,
so
love that.
When I hear speakers say that they were sidelined for 2 years or something, or that was the prevalent wisdom, that you wouldn't be able to speak or get, just, we knew it wasn't true.
Yeah.
We know it's not true even today.
Yeah, love that. And I guess, so now, are we back to where we were pre-COVID, or are we in a hybrid world? Like what's happening now, and what will happen over the next few years in your kind of your estimation?
Oh, well, you're really giving me a lot more credit here. So we are in a hybrid mode for sure. I don't personally think, based on just everything that's inside is telling me, that we will ever go back to just 100% in person ever again. I mean, to put on a virtual event is about 70% less cost than to put on a live event or an in-person event. And we have to get together in person. People want to get together in person. There are some associations, for example, that their members said, from this point forward, we don't want to see any virtual. Like, they're done with virtual, at least now. So there'll be some groups that will not go back. There will be many, many groups, companies and associations, et cetera, that will be virtual and in person in a combo of some sort. Sometimes it's in person and they're live streaming to an outside audience that still doesn't feel comfortable traveling, et cetera. And I think that that's going to continue, and that option will be with us for the indefinite future, which is great news, especially for people who are just getting started in the industry.
Yes.
I'll quickly give you an example of why. Because when we work with folks who are just getting started, they say, well, you know, one of their biggest concerns is, how do I break into an industry that has a lot of speakers already that have been speaking for a very long time? And I am new and I don't have anything, you know, to show. I say, well, you couldn't have been any luckier than to be starting up this business in COVID era. Because the fact of the matter is, many of the assets that we now can create for people with people to get them speaking gigs, meaning assets like a demo reel, for example, biggest thing, right? We can create using virtual platform, and the audiences of the people that would be consuming that, the people who are buying that virtual training, that virtual speaking gig, they see that virtual asset as something that's relevant.
Yes.
It's state of the art. Whereas before COVID, if you tried to come in with a demo reel that was all based on you in front of a screen kind of thing, you're like, what is this? So yeah, timing wise, great time to get in this industry.
Awesome. Thanks so much for all your advice and guidance as well. So I guess one last question for me before we close is, if anybody wants to work with you to develop their TED Talk or anything to do with speaking at all, or in fact book you as a speaker, what's the best place to get in touch with you?
That's really easy. AdamMarkel.com. AdamMarkel.com is the simplest place to find all those assets I was mentioning, including demo reel, et cetera. And people that want to themselves just sort of, because my goal overall is to see people develop greater resilience, and you have to be tremendously resilient to be on stage, whether you're a Broadway, you know, actor, or you're a rock star, or you're a public speaker, whatever it might be, or you're just raising capital for your new venture, right? So you have to be tremendously resilient. Folks can go to rankmyresilience.com, rankmyresilience.com, and in 3 minutes take an assessment that will help them know very quickly how resilient they are mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually. Through literally 3 minutes, they'll get their results, and it's entirely free as well.
Amazing. So what I'll do as well, Adam, is I'll post links to both of those in the show notes as well, so people can just click on them and they can dive in and find out more.
Love it.
So thank you so much again for your time today. I really appreciate you coming along and sharing, again, such great value with our audience.
Thank you, Tom.